The sun was just beginning to dip below the skyline, casting long shadows across the grand estate. When the millionaire's last wish was whispered in a trembling voice that carried the weight of a lifetime, in that moment, no one could have imagined that the answer would come not from a family lawyer, a business partner, or even a trusted friend, but from someone the world often overlooked, his new maid. She was quiet, diligent, and always in the background, tending to the mansion's endless needs without ever asking for attention or recognition. Yet, what she didn't know was that this ordinary woman was about to step into a story far bigger than anyone could have predicted. The millionaire, a man whose life had been defined by wealth, power, and secrets, had no heirs to inherit his. For Chan, his closest associates were already jockeying for advantage, each plotting to claim their share of his empire. But his final request wasn't about money. It was personal, intimate, and so unexpected that it would shake the very foundation of everything his household believed about loyalty, trust, and destiny. The maid, humble and unassuming, had unknowingly become the key to fulfilling a wish that had eluded everyone else. Every corner of the mansion whispered reminders of a life lived in grandeur, priceless art, gleaming floors, and rooms filled with treasures most people could only dream of. Yet the millionaire's last days were marked not by these riches, but by regret and longing. He had spent decades chasing ambition, leaving connections and meaningful moments behind. Now, with his time running out, he realized that the most valuable thing he could leave behind wasn't his wealth, it was a secret, a hope, a final chance for something meaningful to endure beyond his lifetime. The maid, unaware of her role in this unfolding story, moved quietly through her duties, never imagining that the simple act of listening, observing, and caring could place her at the heart of a millionaire's final legacy. Every glance, every word exchanged, and every small gesture would soon matter in ways she couldn't yet understand. She had no idea that her compassion, her intuition, and her quiet presence were exactly what the millionaire needed to see his last wish fulfilled. That as the clock ticked closer to the moment of truth, tension filled the air. Family members whispered in corridors, lawyers prepared documents, and the maid went about her work, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around her. No one could predict how the millionaire's secret would unfold, or how it would transform the life of someone who had always seemed invisible. And then, in the stillness of that fateful evening, a single envelope appeared on her tray, its contents promising to change everything. The story was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, as if the paper itself carried the weight of the millionaire's lifetime of secrets. The maid hesitated for a moment, her fingers brushing the edges, heart pounding in her chest. She had served this household for only a few months, but in that time, she had seen enough to know that nothing here was ever simple. The grand walls held whispers of betrayal, unspoken rivalries, and dreams long forgotten. And now, with this single envelope, she was about to step into a world she never imagined. The millionaire, Mr. Harrison, had been a man of contrasts. To outsiders, he was untouchable, a figure of immense wealth and influence. But behind the polished facade, there was a fragility, a vulnerability few had witnessed. Those who worked for him knew that kindness came in rare moments, often accompanied by tests of character and quiet judgment. The maid had noticed these moments early on, the fleeting smiles, the rare words of appreciation. She had learned to read between the lines, to sense when something was urgent or important, even if it was never spoken aloud. Her own life had been far from easy. Coming from a modest background, she had worked tirelessly to support her family, taking jobs that demanded more than they ever offered in return. The mansion had been a new beginning, a chance to prove herself in a world that rarely noticed women like her. She had thought her life was ordinary, predictable, defined by routine and hard work. Yet, as she stared at the envelope, she felt a ripple of destiny stir inside her, a sense that this was far more than just another day of cleaning and errands. The household itself was a maze of hidden alliances and unspoken tensions. Family members lingered in shadowed corners, whispering with hushed urgency about the millionaire's will, each assuming they had insight into his mind. Lawyers shuffled through papers, faces impassive but eyes sharp, calculating every possible scenario. And then there was the staff, all of whom had their own loyalties, fears, and ambitions. Every glance in the corridors seemed charged, every ordinary moment heavy with unspoken expectation. The maid, moving quietly among them, carried a secret that could change everything, and yet she had no idea what lay ahead. Mr. Harrison had always been careful, meticulous in ensuring that his final wishes were guarded, hidden even from those closest to him. The envelope in her hand was no accident. It was meant for her, and her alone. What it contained could redefine the way the household functioned, reveal truths that had been buried for years, or unleash conflicts that no one could have predicted. She felt a mixture of fear, curiosity, and determination as she prepared to open it, aware that her life was about to intersect with the millionaire's in ways that could change her forever. Outside, the evening deepened into a quiet, tense darkness. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick with anticipation. Every heartbeat echoed louder in her chest. Every shadow seemed alive with secrets. And as she finally lifted the flap of the envelope, the first glimpse of what was inside made her gasp in urgent, mysterious instruction that promised to alter not only her future but the fate of everyone under that vast, imposing roof. The contents of the envelope were brief, yet the words seemed to pulse with an unspoken urgency. A list of instructions, a map of sorts, and a single line that sent chills down the maid's spine. Asterisk, only she can see this through. Her mind raced. Why her? Why now? She had been nothing more than a quiet presence in the mansion, a face in the background. And yet, here was a millionaire entrusting her with something that clearly mattered more than money, more than power, more than any of the luxurious things stacked in the rooms around her. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit study, Mr. Harrison's distant relatives huddled together, unaware of the envelope that had changed everything. They argued in low voices, plotting how to secure what they assumed was a financial windfall. One nephew whispered about accelerating legal maneuvers, while a cousin suggested subtly influencing the staff to reveal secrets. Their greed and ambition filled the halls like a tangible fog, a sharp contrast to the calm determination of the maid who now held the key to the millionaire's final wish. None of them suspected that the true heir of his trust was someone they had barely noticed. The staff, too, had their own dynamics at play. The butler, loyal for decades, watched the maid with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. He had served the mansion through storms of wealth and scandal, and instinctively sensed that something was unfolding that could disrupt the careful order he had helped maintain. The cook, ever observant, noticed the shift in her demeanor, the way she clutched the envelope, the tension in her shoulders. Even the gardener, who rarely spoke indoors, seemed to sense that change had come to the estate. In their own ways, each member of the household represented a subplot of tension, uncertainty, and unspoken motives that added layers to the unfolding story. The maid knew she couldn't act impulsively. Every instruction in the envelope seemed to require discretion, courage, and insight. Some were straightforward, others cryptic, almost as if the millionaire had anticipated that his final plan would be challenged at every turn. The deeper she read, the more she realized that fulfilling this last wish wasn't just about completing tasks, it was about navigating the complexities of human nature, the secrets and ambitions that had festered quietly within the mansion walls. Outside, night had fully claimed the estate. The wind rustled through the tall trees, a soft but haunting reminder that the world beyond the mansion was moving forward, oblivious to the storm building inside. The maid moved silently through the hallways, careful not to reveal her discovery. Each step she took brought her closer to fulfilling a mission that could redefine not only the millionaire's legacy but also her own life. And yet, the sense of suspense was unbearable, the knowledge that at any moment, someone could uncover the envelope, the instructions, or her intentions. She paused at the grand staircase, glancing back at the silent faces in the rooms below. Everyone believed they were in control, that they understood the situation, but she now carried a secret with the power to upend everything. And as she tucked the envelope close to her chest, a single thought echoed in her mind. Asterisk, if they find out before the time is right, everything could be lost. The mansion held its breath, and so did she, teetering on the edge of revelation and chaos. The night had deepened into a thick, almost tangible darkness, and the mansion seemed alive with anticipation. Every creak of the floors, every whisper of the wind through the windows, felt amplified in the stillness. The maid moved cautiously, her mind racing with the instructions she had discovered. Each task required precision, secrecy, and timing. One misstep could alert the rest. Auto changes in the maid's behavior. The cousin lingered near the study, pretending to examine old documents but clearly scanning for clues. Even the long-serving butler, normally imperturbable, couldn't hide the flicker of concern in his eyes. Every corner of the mansion seemed to hold secrets, and the tension between those aware and those unaware of the envelope's contents made the air thick and heavy. The stakes had never been higher, and the lines between loyalty, greed, and destiny were blurring with every passing moment. The maid had begun executing the first steps of the instructions, moving swiftly but silently through the house. She had to coordinate actions that required her to rely on intuition and courage, things she had never tested before. Each door she unlocked, each room she entered, felt like stepping into a delicate trap. Somewhere in the silence, she imagined eyes following her, though she could see no one. Every step forward carried the weight of the millionaire's trust, the suspense of family ambitions, and the fear of the unknown. The envelope had also revealed a secret the relatives could never have guessed, a hidden truth about Mr. Harrison that could shift power in the mansion overnight. If anyone discovered this secret prematurely, it would ignite confrontations, betrayals, and chaos. The maid, holding that knowledge, felt the tension coiled tighter around her chest. She understood that she wasn't just performing a task. She was navigating a labyrinth of human desire, greed, and hope, where one wrong move could have catastrophic consequences. Outside, a storm was gathering. Rain began to lash against the windows, winds rattling the shutters as if echoing the turmoil. Inside, the mansion seemed to shrink in the growing darkness. its grand halls turning into corridors of suspense and uncertainty. The maid paused in the main hall, feeling every second stretch like an eternity. Every shadow could be hiding an enemy, every creaking floorboard a warning. She clutched the envelope closer, her pulse a drumbeat of anticipation. She had reached the point where there was no turning back, where every choice mattered, and the climax of the millionaire's final wish was about to collide with the ambitions, secrets, and fears of everyone in the house. And then, from the far end of the hall, a sudden sound broke the silence, a whisper, a footstep, or perhaps a warning pulling her attention and forcing her to freeze. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, the night stretched taut, and the moment of truth was impossibly close. Every eye, every motive, every secret was converging, and the tension had reached its peak. The story was on the verge of exploding, and nothing would remain hidden for long. As the maid froze at the sudden sound, her heart pounding like a drum, a new realization struck her, a detail she had overlooked in the envelope's instructions. There was a hidden layer to the millionaire's last wish, something that wasn't just about completing tasks or following orders. Someone else knew more than she thought, and they were already moving. Her instinct screamed at the mansion was no longer just a maze of secrets, it had become a battlefield of hidden agendas. From the shadows, a figure emerged, silent and deliberate. It wasn't one of the obvious suspects, the nephew or the cousin, but someone she had never considered a threat. The longtime housekeeper, who had always appeared friendly and harmless, stepped forward with a knowing look in her eyes. She reached for a drawer where confidential papers were kept, and the maid realized with a jolt that this woman had been watching every move, waiting for the perfect moment to intervene. The revelation hit like a lightning strike. The envelope had not only put her at the center of the millionaire's secret, but had also exposed her to unexpected danger from someone inside the mansion itself. Meanwhile, the relatives downstairs grew restless, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. They whispered in hurried tones, speculating about sudden changes in the household, unaware that the maid was already navigating a more complex web than they could ever imagine. Every second that ticked by increased the stakes, and the mansion seemed to pulse with the tension of anticipation. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling windows and rain thrashing against the walls, as if echoing the growing chaos within. The envelope's next instructions became even more cryptic, demanding decisions that tested not only the maid's courage, but also her judgment. One line hinted at a secret passage, a hidden key, and a revelation about Mr. Harrison that could turn allies into enemies in an instant. She realized that fulfilling the millionaire's last wish would require her to outsmart not just family members and staff, but someone who had been quietly manipulating events for months. The tension twisted tighter around her. The mansion now is staged for deception, strategy, and unforeseen challenges. In the hall, the housekeeper watched the maid carefully, her eyes flicking to every movement, every hesitation. It was clear she knew more than she was letting on, and the maid understood that trust had become a dangerous luxury. If the housekeeper acted before she completed her part of the instructions, everything, the secret, the inheritance, and the final wish could be compromised. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and order, had transformed into a maze of suspense and intrigue, where every glance, every step, and every whispered word carried the power to change everything. The maid tightened her grip on the envelope, feeling the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. The storm outside raged harder, shadows stretched longer, and she realized the mansion was no longer just a house. It was a test, a trap, and a stage for a secret that could alter the lives of everyone within its walls. And as the housekeeper moved closer, a faint sound from the upper floor caught her attention, hinting that yet another hidden player was about to enter the game, escalating the tension toward a climax no one could have predicted. The maid's pulse raced as she ascended the grand staircase, the envelope clutched tightly in her hand. Every creak of the steps echoed through the mansion like a warning. The housekeeper followed closely, silent but relentless, and the distant whispers of the restless relatives downstairs made her aware that time was running out. She reached the top floor, where the envelope's final instructions pointed toward a small, locked study that had always been off. Her hands trembled as she fit the hidden key into the lock, the tumblers clicking with an almost ceremonial finality. Inside, the room was bathed in dim light, lined with shelves of old documents and photographs that revealed the true depth of Mr. Harrison's life. It wasn't wealth alone he had accumulated. He had nurtured secret charitable foundations, invested in projects that transformed lives, and left instructions to distribute his fortune to people who would use it for good. And at the center of it all was the final note addressed specifically to her. Asterisk, you have been my eyes, my heart, and my conscience. Only you can ensure this is carried forward. In that moment, the maid understood that the millionaire's last wish wasn't about inheritance or power, it was about trust, integrity, and the quiet courage of someone who had been overlooked her entire life. The housekeeper stepped into the room, her face a mask of determination, but the maid was ready. She explained that the envelope's contents were meant to be executed exactly as written, and that the stakes were higher than anyone else could comprehend. A tense standoff followed, the air thick with suspense as the housekeeper weighed her options. Finally, Recognizing the maid's unwavering resolve and understanding the moral gravity of the instructions, she stepped back, conceding silently. Outside the room, the relatives' plotting continued, oblivious to the true course of the millionaire's final wishes, which were now unfolding exactly as he had intended. The maid moved quickly to carry out the last of the instructions, distributing key documents to charitable organizations, securing the hidden investments, and ensuring that the fortune would benefit those who truly needed it. The mansion, once filled with greed and tension, began to breathe with a new rhythm, as if releasing the weight of decades of secrets. The storm outside subsided, leaving a calm silence that mirrored the resolution of the conflict within. She had fulfilled the millionaire's wish, proved her courage, and claimed a recognition she had never sought but deeply deserved. Just as she exhaled, believing the ordeal was over, a soft click came from the envelope she still held. Inside, she discovered a second, smaller note she had not noticed before. It read, "Asterisk, you have done well, but the true test begins now. One who seems loyal is not as they appear." Her heart skipped a beat. The mansion was quiet. The storm had passed, but the shadow of intrigue lingered. Even after fulfilling the millionaire's last wish, the game of secrets, trust, and hidden motives was far from over. And in that quiet, tension-filled moment, she realized that her journey, her real challenge, was only just beginning. The maid stood in the quiet study, the second note trembling slightly in her hands. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, the secrets revealed, the challenges overcome, and the millionaire's trust placed entirely in her hands. The mansion had shifted from a place of tension and hidden agendas to one of clarity and purpose. She knew that, while there were still shadows of uncertainty, she had honored Mr. Harrison's last wish with courage and integrity. Downstairs, the relatives discovered that the inheritance they had schemed for had already been redirected. Downstairs, the relatives discovered that the inheritance they had schemed for had already been redirected. Legal documents confirmed that the wealth was being distributed to charitable foundations, community projects, and individuals the millionaire had quietly supported during his life. Shock and frustration rippled through them, but the maid remained unseen, aware that her role had been to protect the vision, not to engage in confrontation. The housekeeper, once a potential threat, now worked alongside her quietly, having recognized the importance of loyalty and discretion in the face of the millionaire's moral legacy. The staff slowly began to adjust to the new rhythm of the mansion. The butler, who had spent decades maintaining order, now approached the maid with quiet respect, acknowledging the leadership and insight she had demonstrated. The cook, the gardener, and the rest of the household staff started seeing her in a different light, not just as a maid, but as someone whose wisdom and determination had changed the course of the estate. Even the relatives, though disappointed, could not deny that the millionaire's final instructions had been executed flawlessly, reflecting a vision of compassion, fairness, and foresight that none of them had anticipated. Outside, the storm had passed entirely. The first light of dawn broke over the estate, spilling golden warmth into the halls that had been filled with tension and uncertainty just hours before. The maid stood by a window, looking out at the sprawling gardens, feeling a sense of accomplishment, mixed with quiet anticipation. The second note had reminded her that life would continue to hold challenges and surprises, but she now had the confidence to face them with integrity and courage. She understood that the true value of the millionaire's last wish was not in wealth or material gain, but in trust, responsibility, and the courage to act rightly when no one was watching. As she placed the envelope safely in a drawer, she reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. What began as an ordinary role in a wealthy household had transformed into a journey of discovery, bravery, and purpose. She realized that her strength, compassion, and attention to detail had made all the difference. The mansion, once a symbol of power and secrecy, had become a place of legacy and hope, thanks to her dedication. And as she stepped out into the morning light, she knew that this chapter had closed, but her own story, her true journey, was just beginning.